Welcome. We're going to talk about the webinar, Don't Just Rely on Your CV, and looking for opportunities in, let's face it, rather tough times. And I'm going to talk to you about this concept of let's go fishing, because looking for new opportunities is a bit like going fishing. If you haven't got your rod out there and your line and a piece of bait, you're not going to catch anything. And what we're trying to do is to catch opportunities, and that's sort of going to be a bit of a theme of what we're going to talk about. A little bit about me. I'm David Yeabsley, and if you've got any questions after the session, please drop me an email, although I'm happy to stay on and have a conversation with anybody that would like to have a chat. And also, yeah, I'm the author of the book called Future Proof Yourself, as you can see nicely advertised behind me. And I'll sort of tap into that a little bit in some of those concepts. I wrote that last year, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about is based on my findings in writing that book. A lot of what I also talk about will be on my YouTube site. I put a video on there, 2 videos a week. One is some content of an idea, of what is obviously topical, and also I do lots of interviews of people about their careers, which are great for ideas and gets people thinking. And they're people of all different generations on there that I interview, and I'll talk more about that and the importance of that a bit later. Like Zoom, LinkedIn is now my new best friend, where I think we've all connected. And yeah, I also have a podcast for the interviews as well. So that's a little bit about me. What have I been doing for the last goodness knows how many years? Well, I've been running my own training company called the People Animators. It's been wonderful. We've worked with all sorts of organisations in the UK and abroad, all sorts of subjects, all different types of organisations, from big bankers in the city and insurance companies to accountants, to charities, to one of my favourite clients is a toy shop, to Formula One racing teams. So very diverse, and working with people at lots of different levels. And over the last, especially sort of the last 8 years, I've been doing lots more coaching, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about is based on my findings from those coaching sessions, hence the reason I wrote the book called Future Proof Yourself. I'll tell you more about as we go along. But what I want to create this afternoon is some good thinking time. You know, a bit of quality and constant reflection time, which is really, really important. And if anybody needs a bit of help in that, I've got a review document, if you email me, that I can send to you. And it just gets you to go through lots of areas of your career, your work, your life, and just gets you to think about, yeah, where do I need to, you know, what am I particularly good at, and what do I need to particularly focus on? And as you'll see from that picture, I've got no mobile device. Very, very important, I think, to give us thinking time. But the trouble is, when you've got a mobile device and it pings and it bleeps at you, you constantly look at it and then start replying, and then you start looking at other things, and it's not good for thinking time. So why future proofing? Well, it's a story that goes back to the 1980s, if any of you can remember that far back, and I expect you weren't born then. But when I left school, I wasn't particularly good at school, and I didn't really understand school. It wasn't I didn't try hard, just didn't get it. Apart from sport, I was quite good at sport. But when I was finishing school to go out into the big wide world to work for an insurance company, a big sort of event happened in my life. And it was one day when I was walking home from school. And as I was walking home from school, I noticed my dad's car was in the driveway of the house. And I thought, that's a bit strange. What's my dad doing back up from work? And it's only 4:30. He never used to get home until about 6:30. And I went into the house and into the lounge, and I saw my dad sat on the chair, and he had his head in his hands and he was crying. And I'd never seen my dad cry before. I said, what's the matter? He said, they don't need me anymore. I said, what do you mean they don't need you anymore? And he says, I've been made redundant. And he went on to tell me that he never saw it coming, and he certainly didn't have transferable skills. And unfortunately, he hit a very difficult time in his life, and in fairness, never really recovered. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But it had a huge impact with me, because as I left school and went to work for this life insurance company, I saw lots of my dads there, and they've been doing the same job for many years. And I thought, I need to be careful here that I don't get sucked in. And I made myself leave and did lots of different jobs because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I was 29 that I actually got my first job in training, which I love learning. I just wasn't very good at school. And I wasn't particularly good at academia and still not very good at academia. But all what I'm going to talk to you about is my experiences and my conversations that I've had with people. So I think there's perhaps other ways of learning. So what now? Well, what we've got to think about ourselves now is we need to think about ourselves as a limited company. And we should perhaps all have to register ourselves at Companies House, because now when we are looking for opportunities and to manage the rest of our careers, because who knows when we're going to be able to retire, we now need to become our sales team. We need to be our value creation team. We need to be good at outsourcing and getting external support and advice. Perhaps we could call that networking. We need good consultancy skills because now you need to promote and sell yourself. We need to be good subject matter experts on ourselves. We need to be confident and comfortable in talking about ourselves and explaining what we've done, but also the value that we can bring for the future. We need to be value delivery. We need to be our own HR and learning and development department so we continue to grow. Plus also we're compliant. We need to be good at our finances, and we obviously need to be good at marketing and doing our own PR and delivering great service and products in what we do, which is ourselves. So what we've got to do is to start thinking about how we're going to be relevant and value for the rest of our working careers. And that's what future proofing is really about. And it's all about taking self-responsibility. There's no them and they. You'll never hear me moaning and groaning about other people, blaming Boris for this, Boris for that, European Commission for this, Donald Trump for that. Just get on with it. You know, we need to take our own responsibility, and I'll talk about professional responsibility a bit later. And yeah, so you know, it doesn't matter what level, what age group we're in. And I'll talk more about the different generations later. But as I said to my son when I dropped him off at his first day of his graduate program 2 years ago, I said, Matt, welcome to the next 50 years of your life. I won't tell you how he replied. But that is the reality. And for us, who knows when we're going to be able to retire, because unless you've got a final salary pension scheme, which there's less and less of those these days, all of our pensions have taken a nice hit in recent months. So what we've got to now think about is, have we ever done any of the following? Perhaps decided to eat well or go on a diet. I'm certainly thinking about that. I've put a couple of pounds on over lockdown. Yeah, I go to well, not necessarily gym, but I do a lot of cycling. So I'm conscious of, you know, thinking about keeping myself fit, which I'm sure we all have done. Perhaps we've all done a spring clean, got some financial planning advice. Perhaps we've cleared out old clothes. But how often do we actually sit down and think, am I investing in myself and my self-development? Which is vital, because if we don't do it, who's going to do it for us? And even if we work for a company, don't sit around and wait for the company to do it. It's our responsibility to keep ourselves relevant and value for the rest of our careers. As the famous Warren Buffett would say, he's the guy that is perhaps one of the world's greatest investors on the stock market. But he, despite all his investments, he always says, you are your biggest asset. You need to invest in yourself, because if you don't, who's going to do it for you? So I think we'll all agree it's rather tough out there at the moment, but we need to have a plan. We need to be very organised. We need to be self-motivated. We need to have the ability to think differently, and we need to work very hard to make it happen. And we need to focus on what I or we can control. You know, there's no point looking at other people to do things for us. And I think it's also quite important that, you know, obviously the market is very difficult for looking for job opportunities. It's not that you're not capable of doing the job that you apply for. It's just that hundreds of other people are also applying for those positions. And so the competition is huge, and we need to look at the marginal gains that can make a difference. So we'll look at some of those concepts as well. Anybody got an idea who this might be? Some people think it might have been me, and I think, I wish. I've never had that much hair, as much as I'd like to have had hair like that. His name was Stephen Sasson, And in 1978, he invented this. Anybody got any ideas what that might be? And he worked for Kodak. And at the time in the 70s and 80s, Kodak was one of the world's greatest brands. And they employed hundreds of thousands of people. And now they employ about 3,000 people, I think it is, across the world. I think it's fair to say they didn't future-proof themselves, because he invented the digital camera. And up until that stage, we used to use these Instamatic cameras. And when we went on holiday, in the days that when we used to be able to go on holiday, we used to put the film in the camera, we used to close it up, take a picture, wind it on, take another picture. And then when we got home, after taking our 24 or 36 pictures, we used to take the film out of the camera. We used to put it in an envelope with a check for 49p, put it in the post box, and hopefully 2 weeks later, our photos would turn up. The problem with Kodak is that they made so much money out of film, they thought the digital camera, because it didn't have film, would put them out of business. Well, it did, because they didn't innovate and grow. And I would argue that if they'd have future-proofed themselves as a business, they would have been Apple, and we'd all now be walking around with Kodak mobile devices. And it's a bit like Blockbuster. Blockbuster had the opportunity to go online with all their films, but they declined that because they made more money out of late returns than they did actually of selling the films up front. So of course, that's going to hit one of their revenue streams. So they decided not to do it. And obviously, Netflix is another story for another day about how they've developed and grown. So I've always said to myself, I don't want to end up like Kodak, and I don't want to end up like Blockbuster and lots of other organisations that I'm sure we can add to that list. What I do want to be able to do is to be able to diverse, be more flexible, be able to pivot, new business word that we'll talk about a bit later. And yeah, the construction industry never thought that they would be using drones to map out construction sites. Farmers never thought their tractors would be governed by satellite, and they would be automated, that they would drive round a field with the driver just sat in there sort of on his mobile phone or reading the paper, if they still read newspapers. So they're two industries that have developed and changed a lot with lots of others. And obviously our world is a lot more different now than it used to be. Even before lockdown, not many of us were using Zoom and Teams. Now we're all experts in it. And if we're not, we need to learn to be experts in it, because that's going to be a requirement of the working world. So I think it's fair to say that, I don't know about you, but I felt very vulnerable during the whole process, especially at the start. I was running a lovely training company, doing lots of lovely training courses for all sorts of companies, and things didn't get postponed, they all got cancelled. And naturally the training is the last thing to go back online when companies are up and running. But yeah, I'm slowly starting to find that people are starting to engage. So what's the new normal going to be? Well, we don't know. What we do know, it's going to be a lot different to what it was in the past. And also what was going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years is just happened so much quicker in terms of the way that we're going to work and the way we're going to have our working lives. There's lots of changes happening very, very quickly. And we need, whilst we may be outside of the working world, we need to still be talking to lots of people who are in, so we understand what's happening around us. And that's a real big key thing that I'm going to talk about this afternoon. So what are we going to actually specifically talk about this afternoon? We could talk about creating quality and reflection time. We'll talk about the art of successful networking, and everyone groans, oh, do I have to? Yes, you do. Finding opportunities. Perhaps we need to look at what we do slightly different and not expect to get a full-time job. And I'll talk to you about a lot of the coaching conversations I have with people that I speak to and help them to find out their positions and what they're going to do. And it is, yeah, a lot of change and a lot of different ways of working. We also need to think about our industry and target companies. What are they going to look like in the next 6 to 12 months? These companies used to have 5 and 10 year plans. It's more like sort of 5 days and 10 days now. So what are they going to look like? And I think it's fair to say there are companies now that are operating that won't exist in 2 years' time. And in 2 years' time, there'll be companies up and running that don't exist now, along with jobs. Some jobs we do now will become obsolete, and yeah, they'll be replaced by other types of work. And we need to be mindful of this and think, okay, what's the best position for us? We need to demonstrate that we're a good return on investment. Why should they employ you, or should they go and buy some more computers or more software, or perhaps desks for people to work from home? And yeah, do I need to be more adaptable, agile, and able to pivot? Well, a bit like networking. The answer is yes. And you don't just rely on your CV. And I'm going to talk this afternoon about finding other opportunities and other ways to find a job, rather than just sending your CV off to a recruitment consultant with your fingers crossed and hoping something's going to happen. Because whilst you've still got to do that, and you've still got to have a great CV, you need to not just rely on that. You've got to look at other ways to do things. So that's what we've got planned for this afternoon, for the next 40 minutes. Any questions or anything in particular that you'd like me to focus on? Or are you quite happy with that content? Okay, so we'll
happy with that content.
Great. So we'll crack on. Any time, please stop me and say you've got a question, or save the questions at the end and we can have a further discussion as well. More than happy to do that. Okay, let me press the right button. Okay, so first thing, thinking time. And this is really, really quite important. I love my notebook, and it's amazing how many people still have notebooks despite the digital world that we live in. But my notebooks are slightly different. At the front of them, I have all my to-do lists, like most people do. But at the back, that's where all the magic happens. These are my thinking ideas, my mind maps, my business ideas, perhaps job ideas, things that I want to focus on, my personal goals, my big ideas. These are the key people that I need to keep in contact with on a regular basis. And I'll talk more about them under networking. This is my reading list and my film list. People are always saying, oh, you ought to read this, you ought to watch that, and I make a note of it. And then when I'm looking for new material and content, I go and do that. What are my values? What have I learned? What do I need to learn? So I use this a lot in terms of, when we're having a bit of a tough time and perhaps the motivational levels are a bit low, and we need to perhaps, hopefully at the moment, just go and sit in the garden or go and sit out in the park somewhere and just take your notebook, no digital devices, and just create some thinking time. And that's what I want to do this afternoon, create some thinking time and come up with some ideas. I'm afraid by the end of this session, you won't have a full-time job, which we'd all love, but it will give you ideas about how to go and work on one and find things from a different perspective. So what my job is to do is to generate new ideas for you. So try and put this situation into the context of your career and long-term future. We've all obviously got lots longer that we need the time that we're going to have to spend at work for obvious reasons. So you've got to try and put it into the context. No rash and panic decisions that could have a negative impact, despite sometimes thinking rude words and just running off somewhere and thinking, oh, I never want to talk to anybody ever again, which I'm sure we've all felt at some stage. Speak to people you trust who give good advice and are a calming influence. There is definitely certain people that you don't want to talk to. Oh, yeah, well, I'm really busy. Everything's great. Oh, yeah, well, it's so tough and I can't go on holiday. It's a real shame. But, oh, they're just making a meal out of what's happening. They're the type of people that just want to go off and talk about themselves. You don't really need them. So under networking, I'll talk more about finding some really good people that you can trust and rely on in your network. Reflect on, what is the best businesses to work on in the future? Do I need to change industry? Do I need to think about what I'm doing and perhaps diversify and think about, what are these organizations going to look like in the next sort of 6 to 9 months? Or perhaps do I need to just take a short term or perhaps role, project work, or just a part-time job just to tie us over, and then hopefully next year things will pick up. They're all different things that we need to consider and think about. And also, how can we come out of this situation feeling fitter and stronger, and actually be able to look back and go, yeah, that was tough, but in some ways actually I benefited from it. And that's certainly something that I'm looking and trying to do. And as I said, create that thinking time wisely with people that you know, and also on your own. So people that you can have really good conversations with. People aren't just going to then sit there and give you lots of advice and you think, thanks, you haven't listened to a word I've said. And also with yourself in thinking about where and who makes you think differently. And yeah, no rash and panic decisions. Try and look at the situation with the long term in mind. Remember, you are now a limited company. Limited companies have long-term plans. Okay, things are going to go wrong in the short term, i.e. now, but you've got to have those long-term thinking. And since setting up my business, my training company over 20 years ago, I always took a very long-term view to everything. And I still do now. I might meet someone, I think, oh, they'd be good to do business with. I don't try and sort of, if they say no to me, okay, they said no now, perhaps in 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, I will get business from them. And that certainly happened. And that's always been my way of keeping in contact with everybody. So there's a little bit on reflection time. Get yourself a good notebook. The front is your to-do lists of things you've got to do on a regular basis. And your back is your mind maps and your ideas and ways of thinking. Don't evaluate any ideas you ever come up with. Just write them down and then evaluate them and think about them on another day. So the art of successful networking, it isn't like this. Hello, my name's David. I'm a very successful businessman. I run training courses and coaching programs. Would you like to buy some? That is not networking. Networking is just building up contacts with people that you trust, and also people I can help and people that can help me. It's a two-way process. Think about people who make you think differently. I love people that are very logical and analytical, because I'm not. I also love people who are very maverick and off the wall that make me think differently. I love talking to people in different industries because I can learn something from them. And that's why I love working with, or loved working in the past with people of all sorts of different organisations, because they make me think differently. Because I know how David thinks, I need to learn how other people think. So who can I help and who can help me? Reconnect with some people that you valued in the past, perhaps different organisations, different careers, perhaps a while ago, but you just thought, do you know what, I always used to enjoy talking to them. And they were a good listener, or they always gave a good balanced advice. They didn't sort of turn it into a political debate or anything like that, or have an axe to grind. They were just themselves. Get back in contact with them. And if we're not good at this, just do a list of 5 or 6 people that next week you're just going to get back in contact with. Have some good questions to ask them. I ask people questions all the time. How's your business doing and how's it coping? How are you getting back into the working environment? How do you see the future? What changes do you envisage? And they get talking and they tell me, and I call it free learning. So if I can learn from others, I then start to become, hopefully, more valuable because I understand how other people think. Think about your LinkedIn profile. Remember, it's an extension of your CV. So be active with your LinkedIn profile in liking and commenting on posts. Perhaps if you've got a particular industry that you work in, start to think about putting your own posts or your own observations out there. It just shows that you're engaged. One other thing with your LinkedIn profile, think about your heading under your picture and your name. You may like to keep it as it was, purely and simply, or what the job is that you would like, because sometimes as soon as you've got, looking for opportunities and you're trying to connect with others, they can sometimes think, oh no, they're looking for a job, I won't connect with them. Or if you've got what I've got, obviously, because I am a coach, I'm a trainer, I'm a speaker, I'm a writer, people are always trying to sell me something. So if you do want to try and connect with people at the same levels that you've been working at, you might like to keep your title the same. And just spend the next sort of month or so just connecting with lots of people and having conversations. Some people reply, some people just connect. you just never know what might come out of it. And yeah, connect with people with the same roles and try and get into conversations, how they see the future, how did they get their role, and find out a bit more about their business. And show you're engaged in a profession. I'm not asking you to go and do a YouTube site like I've done or start writing books, but you may like to start writing, and I'm going to talk more about that a bit later in developing our confidence and also having to talk about ourselves. It's a very good exercise. And during lockdown, I've now written a second book, and it's obviously going to be called Don't Just Rely on Your CV. And it's all my findings, my conversations, and my thoughts from lockdown about how to help people find opportunities. So it shows that I'm very much engaged with what I'm doing, because remember, we're all a limited company. You've got to get out there and do a bit of PR to get people to notice you. Invest in your network. Be a giver, not a taker. Now, I'm sure that we're all brilliant at giving people advice. I'm brilliant at it because I get paid for it, which is wonderful. But it's when I've given some people advice, that's the time I need to go and look in the mirror and go, David, you were great today, but do you take any of your own advice? And I think that's really quite important, that when we do go and talk to people, help others out. Be a good listener and invest in them. Ask them about them, even if it's just making them feel good about themselves. And especially if someone's going through a hard time at the moment, that's a great gift to give somebody. And giving them time, because in the past, perhaps we haven't had time for these conversations. And I've, very proactive in doing this and just being a good friend. In keeping in contact with people that I know have got a bit of a tough time. I'm out cycling with two friends tonight who are having a very tough time looking for jobs, and we sort of have a chat about all sorts of things. And I'll tell you about some of their stories a bit later. So I'm constantly, and just sometimes they just want someone to listen to. To listen to them. And believe it or not, I'm doing lots of talking now, but I try and be a good listener and create those great friendships. And I've got people that if I'd have known this in my 20s, life would have been so much easier. But I've reconnected with lots of people over the years, and a lot of my friends and a lot of my contacts in business say, "Oh, you're so good at keeping in contact." My old HR director of over 20 years ago, we still meet, and we haven't met this year, but we normally meet twice a year for lunch. Why? Because I book it and I organise it. And she goes, "Oh, you are good at keeping in contact." But why do I do it? One, she makes me think differently. Two, she's always acted as a bit of a mentor. And three, she quite often gives me some work. So it's worth me, when she moves to different companies, keeping in contact. So the art of successful networking, it isn't walking around with a business card. It's just keeping in contact with people and making the effort and being a giver, not a taker. So go and talk to people that you respect, and you've got time for. And just even to say, could we set up a Zoom call for 20 minutes? I've just got some questions I'd like to ask you. They can only say no, but normally they say yes. And you get them talking, and they talk and talk and talk, and you get all this free information. And by the end of it, they quite often say, "Oh, actually, you ought to have a chat with them," or something often comes out of these things, but you've got to invest in it. So finding opportunities. Is a fully employable position realistic, and at what level? This is the tough bit. Do I need to be more realistic? Unfortunately, yes. The competition is rife. Perhaps look at interim and project work. So one of the people that I'm cycling with tonight, he wants a full-time job. And it's just really been impossible for him to find something. But what he's now doing is actually working for potentially 2 or 3 different companies. He's got a part-time job working for one company, not really doing what he wants to do, but it's a job, it's paying some money, it's keeping things ticking over. He's now perhaps talking to another organisation who wants to import into this country toothpaste from India. And he's sort of thought, well, actually, I could be part of something here, and it could turn into some paid work. So he's looking at different things that don't involve his CV. He's talking to people that he knows in the past that perhaps need someone just to do some work for a month, or perhaps to step in on a certain project because there's lots of change in businesses. And you don't necessarily need your CV for these things. Maybe becoming a consultant or being self-employed. There again, you don't often need a CV for these. We need to start presenting ourselves in a different way. Perhaps have several jobs and assignments on the go. And we then start to, we are this limited company that's servicing different clients. Think of it along those lines, rather than just going and having one permanent job. This is more about how I work. I have lots of different clients. So why shouldn't that be any different? Me running my own business, you running your own business, being employable, that you do different projects for different people. And not just having to work on your CV, and improve our consultancy techniques. So our CV, I'll talk more about CVs in a moment, but they really need to be proposal documents about the value that you can bring in the future. A good consultant understands businesses that he goes and talks to. So if you're going to go for a job interview, get some good inside information on them. Understand how they work. What's their future? How do they see their business and their market adapting or not adapting? And then we need to be good at promoting ourselves, because if you don't do it, who's going to do it for you? Or it may be at the moment, I think, right, total change of direction. What's something else that I can get involved in where the market is a lot more favourable? And perhaps I've got a passion for something. So looking at those areas, and start to think about companies you'd like to work for in the future. Perhaps you're not going to get a job with them in the next 6 months or 12 months, but okay, I can get, going back to point 4, I can have several assignments going on, perhaps for the next sort of 9 to 12 months. And then next year I can start to target other companies that I would like to work for. And that's no different to me in my business development. I think of, they'd be a good company to do some work with. But it may take me several years to get in there. Remember, we've still got to stay at work for a long time. So we've still got to continue to plan ahead. And even if you do get a job,
just be careful. Could you be careful? Sorry. I thought I was on mute.
Okay, if you just want to mute it now, that's absolutely fine. No worries, no worries. So are there any particular specific companies that you want to target? And I'm constantly doing this in my business, and I want us to think along the same ways. We've got to slowly start to get to know some people in those businesses, start to get our PR and marketing out there, connect with them. And then gradually, as the time comes, that we can go and knock on their door and say, look, I can add this value to your business. Referral programs, quite a lot of larger organizations do referral programs. So you need to find some contacts in those companies so they can keep you updated of what's happening. And there again, it's about you treating them as a potential client and keeping in contact with them over a period of time. So you've got to start getting some Excel spreadsheets of people you need to keep in contact with, and companies you want to talk to on a regular basis, and look at what their websites and their LinkedIn profiles. And perhaps once a week, I've got 20, 30 companies. I'm just going to look on their website, see if any new opportunities are arising, find out if they do referral programs. Or perhaps, is there anybody in there that I can get into a conversation with about doing some consultancy work or project work or interim work? Because there again, sometimes interim roles, you don't have to go through this very long process with your CV necessarily, and going through the whole recruitment process. It's hard work. I spend at the moment, normally from 8 o'clock till just after 12 o'clock, literally just prospecting for new opportunities. Yes, I know I run my own company, but it's no different. I'm constantly on it. And then in the afternoon, I do my talks, my webinars, my coaching offerings and training that I do into companies via Zoom. I do all that in the afternoon, but it's the morning where I do all my activity. I'm incredibly organized, very disciplined, which is really important. I will not leave any stone unturned. And that is, I think, a really important way to be. Yes, we have tough days. So I'm not going to cover much on well-being this afternoon, but know what chills you out, what makes you feel good. And at the moment, it's sort of me going off cycling quite a lot. My knees are struggling through it because they've been taking a bit of a hammering recently, but I've got to do it because it treats the rest of my body and my mind so much better. So what will these businesses look like in 6 to 12 months? What are our social habits? What will technology be like? We've got to be talking to people that are involved in these areas so we know what's happening. As I said, if I've been out of work for say the last 4 months, and I've never really operated Zoom or Teams, that's going to be a huge way of working in the future. So I've got to think about that, and also, which I'll come on to in a moment, about how do we come across in terms of the way we position our screen and the way we talk, our body language and our tone of voice when we are on calls with others. These are all slightly different things that we haven't thought about so much in the past, plus also the technology. So are you a good return on investment? Well, we all like to think so, but we've got to prove it. And we've got to demonstrate professional responsibility. You've got to be very good at what you do. I call it Roger Federer thinking and performance. Roger Federer is perhaps one of the world's greatest sports people of all time. Obviously, there's lots of others that you could be comparable. The Williams sisters, I'd give them the tennis ladies as well. Absolutely amazing. And if you think about the Williams sisters and Roger Federer, they know exactly what they're good at. They know how to perform to their best of their abilities on all occasions. We need to do the same. And it's like me doing my training and development, going into companies. You can't have a bad day because you're always on show. And it's a bit like going to the theatre. If you went to the theatre and spent fortunes of money going to London, going out for a meal, theatre ticket, buying a drink. Obviously, we can't do these things, but when we used to be able to do them. And then the curtain went up and the cast came on the stage and they were singing and dancing. Then halfway through the first song, they just all stopped and said, God, do you know how many times we've sung this song on board census of this? You'd think, well, that's not very professional. So we've got to be like that. We've got to be really good at what we do. How do we hone our skills and improve? But what is important, and I'd like to talk briefly about our CVs here, don't just fill your CV of what you've done in the past, your experience. Think about the future value you can bring people for the future. So let me just do an example on myself. Well, I'm David. I've been running training courses on leadership and management skills for the last 20 years for all sorts of companies. I've been here, been there, I've met these people, I've worked with them. I've got loads of company names that I could show and they could do wonderful testimonials. That's great, David. That's what you've done in the past. But what's the value that you can now bring to the future? And that's what we need to think about, not just what we have done, but think about as a business consultant, we're solving solutions. We're solving that business solution for the clients, and that's going to be the company you're going to go and work for. I like to, you may laugh at this, but I've written a couple of blogs and done some videos on the fact that in future you need to treat the company you're going to go and work for and your managers as clients. And you need to understand what their wants, needs and desires are for the future. And how do you diversify and change so you can meet those demands so they want to keep employing you. As I said, I've got 20 years of running my business, but is it the right experience for the future? That's why I have to talk to so many people and understand their ideas and how they see things to get me thinking differently. My thinking from years gone isn't going to help. I need new ways of thinking. And I need to be able to demonstrate it. So this morning, me and my colleague, we were on a Zoom call to a company in Oxford, and they want us to do quite a big training program, and we were on show. So yeah, we needed to demonstrate our competence, our confidence, and our ability to deliver what they need to deliver because their business is changing. We didn't talk about what we've done in the past. We talked about the value that we can bring to them for the future. Unfortunately, afterwards, we got the call to say they're going to go with us, which is good news. So we need to be good at selling ourselves. And it's a bit like networking. Oh, do we have to? Yes. If you can't sell yourself, who's going to do it for you? So 2 tips. First one, get a PowerPoint slide deck, 15 slides, and put your CV onto a PowerPoint slide deck. Put some pictures in there, create some stories, and practice going through this PowerPoint slide show that you're going to do. Record yourself on Zoom. Make it for 10-15 minutes and get practicing. Because another friend who I'm seeing tonight at the cycling, he had an interview last week, and I said, how did it go? He says, oh, not very well. I said, why? He says, oh, I'm just so rusty at being interviewed. He's got to practice. you're no different to a golfer. If you ever watch golf, I love golfers. I try and play, but I'm just not very good at it. But they can be in a horrendous situation, but they still seem to get the ball, hit the ball, and it goes very close to the, onto the green and near the hole. Why? Because they practice loads. They practice difficult situations. And my friends that I was talking to last week, that I've sort of given a bit of coaching advice to, he's got a situation, he's got what I call a skeleton in the cupboard in his CV. In other words, why he left a company, and it wasn't his choice why he left that company. And he says, I keep getting asked these questions and I'm not sure how to answer them, and I come across really defensive. And I said, well, there again, you've got to write out the question. You've got to think about some really good answers, and you've got to practice on Zoom. Obviously, other video conferencing is available, because you've got to think about that when you answer that question, what is your body language like and what is your tone of voice like? Because they will pick up on it, and you've got to practice selling yourself. So that's one tip in terms of doing the PowerPoint slide and practicing. The other one, I'm sure you've got loads of stories of your career of what's happened. Start to write them down on a Word document. Just create a title and just blah, 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 write it all down. Go on to the next one. And then perhaps in a couple of weeks' time, go back and spell check it and to make sense and make sure the grammar's fine, or get someone else to check it over, and start collecting your stories. This is what I did about 2.5, 3 years ago. That's why I wrote a book, because I wasn't sure. I wanted to write a book, and I'm a member of what we call the Professional Speakers Association. I want to go on stage and do big conferences, not many of them going on at the moment, and I wasn't sure what topic to talk about, and that's how I came up with a future-proofing concept. I just put all my stories down, and it gave me the confidence, and it also gives me new things to talk about. So when I am talking to different people, I've always got a new sort of slant or blog that I've been sort of working on, or a YouTube video I've been working on. It just helps me be confident and competent in talking and selling myself. We need to practice it. It's not just going to happen. You can't just wing these things. And as I said, write about yourself. Do a PowerPoint or even a video. There again, practice on Zoom. You can just record it and play it back, or find a good friend that will, sit and listen and give you some good advice. Constantly be developing yourselves and starting to think about what are the key competencies and knowledge I will need for the future. Because as I said, we've got to keep developing. I had quite a very difficult conversation. I think it was on Monday, a coaching conversation with somebody who asked to have some time with me. And he said, I've been in IT for many years, and I went for a job, and it was the first interview. I knew there was going to be several interviews, but I didn't get past the first interview because they asked me about a certain piece of software that I knew nothing about. And unfortunately, the recruitment consultant wasn't particularly subtle. He turned around to this gentleman and said, you need to go back to college to learn this stuff, otherwise you're never going to get a job. And unfortunately for the person that I was talking to, many years in IT, but he wasn't necessarily working in his business on software that is particularly relevant for now. And it's sort of become a bit out of date. And he's got a bit of a problem. So we need to be mindful, as I said, even when we're up and running and we've got jobs, we still need to be thinking, what's the market going to need in the next few years? So do I need to be more adaptable, agile, and able to pivot? Yes. I think my son was 6 in this picture. So you need to go and talk to your 6-year-old and get some advice. But my children have been brilliant for me. They've acted as my mentors. And it's what we call reverse mentoring in my world, that we need to go and talk to people from lots of different generations. And is it time for a new mentor? Yes, my son is now 25 and my daughter is 22, and they give me great advice. I need new skills and experiences. And also thinking back to the mentors, I love talking to people of all sorts of different generations. One of my greatest mentors was my auntie. She was 93 when she left us last year, unfortunately. But at the age of 90, she asked for an iPad for her birthday so she could Skype her family in Australia, because she's got no immediate family apart from me as her nephew in the UK, and I sort of started looking after her and things like that. But she wanted to talk to her son and his children in Australia, and despite it, her very late years, she was always learning, always reading good quality newspapers, and then asking my opinions and thoughts on it. I loved her, and yeah, I've got lots of different people of all different generations that I talk to, and that's why I started doing the interviews on my YouTube site, because that gets me to understand how people see things. People are moving into retirement about keeping value and relevant and having a purpose, and also the younger generation about how they're dealing with the new world. Yeah, obviously I've got to continue to update myself and understand the technologies, new thinking and reflection, and being able to think and reflect in different ways, and having new ways of thinking, looking at new opportunities. And as we said, perhaps looking at perhaps totally different careers to what we've done in the past. Might not necessarily be what we want to do, but sometimes we don't necessarily have a choice in that at the moment. You can't have enough good conversations with enough good people to think differently, to see things differently, but pick the people that you talk to. We don't need the doom and gloomers and, oh, this is very difficult, that's very bad. For example, our holiday's been cancelled to Spain. Yeah, so what? Crack on, move on. There's no point sitting around moaning about it. And like a lot of things at the moment, you've got to think, okay, well, how can I turn that into a positive? So yeah, perhaps we'll go and walk the Thames Pathway or something like that, something we've never done before. See it as an opportunity. New reading, constantly be reading articles and books. And there again, if there are nice evenings that you can sort of turn the telly off and, just sit and read and just enjoy the environment. And whilst you're doing that, you're educating yourself with new ways of thinking. Change old habits that are holding us back. So yes, we do need to be adaptable. And as I said, it goes back to the networking. Keep talking to different types of people that can, have a different reflection on the world and have a positive impact on the way you see things. So how are we going to keep ourselves going? What have we got to offer? How can we maximize our talents? Know what you're good at. Spend some time understanding that. There again, a good limited company is a good sports person. They know exactly what their strengths are and how to diversify and change. And remember, no one limited company can rely on one person, and nor can we, or nor can you. I have lots of people that I sometimes phone up. Well, what do you do about this? How do you deal with that? And I did this with my colleague this morning. She's got another sort of area, a piece of work that she was trying to work on that she just couldn't work out. I said, well, just ask me the question. And we had a conversation for 15 minutes and came up with an answer. So just pick the people that you trust to have those conversations. And yeah, what are your talents? And be good at waving your flag, because if you don't, who's going to do it for you? So let's get out there and show that we're open for business. Then again, your LinkedIn and your social media, remember, it stays out there forever. Think about what you're contributing, but you need to show that you're active in your industry. And I think this is really quite important. And you're willing to participate, perhaps in networking groups, networking events, and so on and so forth. Don't just sit in the background and, oh, I'll just listen. Get involved. And if you don't shout about yourself and wave your flag, as I always call it, who's going to do it for you? So we've got to be this limited company with our sales team, product development, L&D, finance, marketing, and so on. We've got to be more multi-skilled in keeping ourselves employable for the rest of our careers. So 4 top tips to finish off with. Create quality reflection time with yourself and with other people that you can have some really good conversations with. You are your own company's sales team. Get used and get comfortable to talking about yourself. I dare say that we're all a subject matter expert in our profession, and perhaps companies we've worked for in the past, and we could talk confidently and competently about what we've done and how it all works. We need to be able to do this about ourselves. You know the message, because if you don't, procrastination isn't an answer. I know it's sort of middle of the summer holidays and things, and people are a bit lethargic. But get networking. Try and put things in place so when things do get better. I'm doing a lot of this. This is how we've all connected. Why do I do these? It's because when I'm not out presenting so much, it's keeping me on my toes, and all the conversations I have with people gives me new ideas to blog and talk about. So I'm investing in the future by doing these. And having lots of conversations with people and networking with different people. And I do believe in the concept of reciprocation. If I can help lots of other people out, another day they'll be able to help me out. Don't just rely on your CV. There's other ways to market, but you've got to work at them. You've got to be very proactive. So there's the 4 top tips. So let's go fishing. Get your fishing rod out, get your line out, get your bait out, and go and try and get some bites. Because if you're not out there and people can't see you out there, okay, don't over the top that you're blogging and posting on every day of the week. You can overdo those things, but just getting the happy medium, just that when people do see your social media, they can see that you're active and you've got something to say, got something to share, and you've got some good opinions on and some good ideas. So I know today's Thursday, but tomorrow Friday, do this once a week. Make a decision. At the end of the week, think, right, next week, what am I going to do? Who do I need to get in contact with? What areas do I need to go and research? What different CVs? So if I'm looking at perhaps different, I had someone who I was coaching and have been still coaching. They were looking for an HR role. They were looking to be a manager of a graduate apprentice scheme or to be a careers advisor. So I said you need 3 different CVs and you need 3 different ways of going to find those jobs. So she had to make those decisions. My friends, as I said, he's got to look at finding other companies that are trying to import into the UK. Could he go and assist them? Could he go and help them and do some of the legwork for them? He's not going to get paid a lot of money, but it's a good start. So make some decisions for yourself each week. So that's a little something for tomorrow. And as I said, if you want to get in contact with me at any time, please do. There's my email address. I think we're all on LinkedIn. Please have a look at the YouTube site, and if you want the coaching document that I mentioned about at the start of the session, I can just easily email that to you. Also, if you want a copy of the slides, more than happy to share those with you. And yeah, keep in contact and let me know how you get on. But are there any questions?
Hi.
Yeah, just go on.
Sorry, I had a question earlier. That's why I took myself off mute.
Oh, right, okay. You crack on.
So how do you stop yourself then from becoming a jack of all trades and a master of none?
Ooh,
because
good question. Good question.
Because I mean, I have had lots of different jobs, and what I'm quite aware of is that some employers may look at it and think, oh, well, she's not really dedicated or she's not really committed if she's done so many different things. And then others may see it as a case of, yes, you do have a lot of experience, and they're prepared to say, well, yes, those are transferable skills. But then you get the others who will be like, well, no, we're looking for a marketing manager with 10 years solid experience.
Yeah. So what sort of profession or what sort of line of work would you like to have?
Okay, well, at this moment in time, I would like to say have a role in diversity. I think it's so relevant now, and especially with everything that's been going on in the media. I think I would like to do something like that where I'm helping, say, an organisation, probably in education or something like that, but a diversity role.
Okay, so what I would do is do quite a bit of research, start to create what you would think would be good programs for companies, and then start trying to hit some HR departments with this, because that's where it all starts. And somehow you need to start connecting with those types of people and find out what they're currently doing, and then that'll generate your ideas and start to think about what offering you can give them. So that's the approach that I would take for something like that. But you've got to think about what is it you can offer them. So what is it
Okay.
about your skills, your background, the way that you are, your thinking process that could aid them in the future to make sure that not they're just compliant, that they're not just, you know, it's not just a tick box exercise, that they are actually fully engaged, and as a business they benefit from it all round. And I think, you know, start to actually think, what is it I've got to market them? What is it I've got to give them? And why should they give it to me rather than someone else? So
Okay.
when I mean being able to do all our different departments, focus on what your profession is. Okay, sometimes that may change, but you've still got to be good at selling yourself and marketing yourself, and developing yourself. That's what I mean by the limited company. But I would still, yeah, think which line of work you want to focus on. And if it is sort of the cultural diversity and inclusion part, yeah, crack on. I mean, it's a very important market for lots and lots of obvious reasons.
Okay.
But I would, you know, try and get into conversations with people who are in companies doing those types of things, and just say, you know, what is the topic? How's it received? What do you think the challenges are in this not just being, what's the word I'm looking for, when it's just people just like it for now?
Like a fad.
That's the word I'm looking for. So that may be a really good question to ask them. How do you feel that you, in your business, you're going to, you know, keep this going so it's not just a fad? Because as someone said to me this morning, which was about that subject and also values that they're trying to put into the business, and one of the senior partners said, oh, we're very good at starting stuff but not continuing it. So there again, that generates conversations to have with people. But I think, but you need to do your background about what you've got to offer. There again, get your PowerPoint slides out and think about, if they asked you, said, okay, you come and run a 2-hour program for us, what would you offer?
Okay.
Because I bet your bottom dollar that if you went through the interview process, they would actually ask you to run some sort of session. So you might as well do that planning and that background work on it now.
Okay. Thank you.
And if you want to talk more about that, and just, you know, the key thing is I would start collecting some really great videos that are out there in a file, so you can use those to generate your ideas and your thoughts and things like that, and then create your own content.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I'd go with that. Any other specific questions?
Yeah, one of the things I think's putting dampening on my applications is my last job was for less than a year, and that was after being made redundant the year before that. So I took a job that was basically on the rebound of after being made redundant, because I was desperate to get a job, but it was completely the wrong job for me. So I was only in it for 9 months, and I left because the whole ethos and style of the company just was really toxic. It was very damaging to my health.
Yeah.
So doesn't look good on my CV, and I know that. But I have to obviously put that on my CV. Is there anything you suggest to make it look better?
Okay. One thing I'd make sure you do is really know, it's like that skeleton in the cupboard thing that I mentioned with the person I talked about. He was a finance director and there was fraud in the business and he got ousted. I'm not saying yours is like that, but what you really need to practice how you're going to answer those questions in a positive way that people can understand your decision-making process.
Right.
Because in some ways of our CVs, they need to be able to tell a bit of a story of why we've done certain things, so they feel comfortable and confident with us. So I would really write all that out and think about how will you be asked those questions, but more importantly, how will you therefore go and answer them?
The trouble is actually getting past the application stage to an interview where I could actually answer the questions more positively.
Well, that is the problem that everyone's got, is that CV stage. So that is where, in terms of you looking for perhaps L&D training roles and things like that, I would start connecting with other training managers within organizations that you find interesting, and trying to build a relationships. You know, how did you get started? What's your background? How do you see training in the future? Because as I said, you know, it's like what we've suffered with is the first thing that gets cut. So it's then thinking, what are other ways of trying to get in without having to give your CV over? And if they can get to know you and have conversations with you, you know, it's a bit like, not necessarily running your own training business, but I've never ever been asked for my CV. I know because I run my own business, but I'm still pitching for long-term work and projects and things.
You still have to have a portfolio, but yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
it's starting just to build up relationships. So literally just use LinkedIn, think about the types of people you'd like to connect with, and just think of some good questions to ask them. How do you feel training is going to be used in companies in the near future? And then start. It's going to take time. And it may be that you need to take other opportunities, part-time opportunities, while you try and build this bigger career thing.
Yeah, that's the type of thing I'm looking for at the moment. Is just get my foot back into work, so I could actually then hopefully find something in the future that I actually like.
Yes, and I think that is the key thing at the moment. You know, a lot of people I've spoken to, they're doing this type of job. It's not what they want. It's only part-time. It doesn't necessarily give them all the money that they need and everything else. But it's a start. But whilst they're doing that, they're spending a lot of time then positioning themselves. What can I do for the future? And it is tough. And so think of activities that you can do that are proactive, that get you up and going. And as I said, you know, putting presentations together, that motivates us and makes us feel better about ourselves. You know, and I find that really good when I'm having a tough day. You know, I'm not getting many yeses, and actually they're all no's, or I can't get hold of anybody. I think, right, just go and do something creative, either writing, designing a presentation. So I've just designed the follow-on webinar for this that I'm going to start putting out in sort of September time. And that sort of just came from the other day, and I sat there thinking, I thought, well, okay, you've done one, why don't you do another one and do a series of them? Because you enjoy doing them and people seem to get benefit from them, so crack on. So there again, start to think how you can get involved in these things. And okay, I'm not earning any money out of these, but that isn't my intention. My intention is to help others at the moment, but then it comes around at a later date. But whilst I'm doing these, I'm also out there doing a bit of paid work for other things. And it's, I guess we're constantly juggling.
David.
Yes.
Hi. I'd just like to pick up on a point that you said about whilst you're doing this, because that's an issue that a lot of people, myself included, have, is that you could take on a position and then sort of drift, in the sense that you're doing that position and then that becomes your job and then that becomes your life. And you don't sort of look for other opportunities, because
so what am I going to say to you?
That, you know, you have to focus and do the other as well. So you have that as your sort of bread and butter, as it were, for now, and then continue to focus on what it is that you really want to do with your mind map.
And create, yes, thank you. You took the words straight out of my mouth. And you need to keep reflecting. So knowing companies, we have this lovely thing called appraisals and performance development reviews and coaching sessions, and everyone goes, I don't want to do that. You've got to now do it on yourself. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Do you want? And so my son, very briefly, he joined a very big multinational, well, European, worldwide motor company. And I said, that's great for 2 years, but don't get stuck there. Because once you get stuck in it, you won't be able to get out of it. And he's just coming up to the end of his graduate program, and he wasn't sure if he was going to get a job there because of what's happened. But he's spent the last 3 months finding other opportunities. He has applied and applied and applied, and last week he got one.
Fantastic.
Because he knew, and he kept sitting down, and he'd quite often say to me, what should I do? What should I do? So find someone who you respect that will have that conversation and say, so what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Because as I keep, you know the saying, if you don't do it for you, who's going to do it for you? And
Mm-hmm.
that is what the whole future proofing is about. You don't get stuck. So the reason I moved out the insurance company, because I didn't want to end up like my dad's situation,
Mm-hmm.
because he had no transferable skills and he never saw it coming. So I'm a bit of a control freak, so I like to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've always liked this subject.
Because I was thinking of, say, a different career path. So, for example, if I wanted to go into teaching,
Yeah.
it's something where I'm going to have to invest a lot of time.
Yes.
So that's, I mean, I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to sort of get sidetracked, don't want to drift, because obviously you need to devote like 2 years for your initial training and then the training after your training. Do you see what I mean? So I don't want to, you know, time is of the essence.
No, you're still young. You've got years to go. You're still young. Yeah. Okay. So you've got to decide, go and talk to some teachers, and you've got to decide, do you want to become a teacher? You've got to make a decision. So last week I was having another, as you say, I have lots of conversations with people. I've got a young adult who wants to set up his own estate agency.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, fair play to you. And I sat there, because he's not earning any money. It's going to take him about 2 years before he can earn any money, but he needs to get a part-time job to earn some money so he can just survive while setting up this business. And I spent half an hour with him saying, Cameron, do you really, really want to do this? And why? Sell it to me. And in the end, after half an hour, he convinced me that he knew that that's what he definitely wants to do. So I said, right, let's work out a way of doing it then. You've got to decide, have lots of conversations with people. What is it you'd really want to do? Because otherwise you'll keep flitting. And no, keep flitting isn't a good idea.
That's what I thought. No, I mean, I toyed with the idea of doing that for a while, but I think on the back of that, that's where the whole diversity thing has come from.
Yeah.
So I think maybe going down the teacher route isn't necessarily something that I want to do, but maybe I want to do something. But there again,
they might need you in colleges and universities. They might need you to go in and do talks to them. So you know, this is where you need to speak to so many. This is why I do so many talks in schools and colleges, because it gets me thinking differently, and I find out about different worlds. Not that I want to do it. I do it on a sort of, when they sometimes invite me. I do one a month quite often, but you need to go and talk to that environment and find out you'll be amazed at the different types of learning opportunities without becoming a teacher in education. So go and find someone who does lecture or works in a college. Where is it you live?
Oh, I live near London.
Whereabouts?
Well, just on the outskirts.
Or give me a name of a place.
Watford.
Watford. Okay.
Yeah.
So Hertfordshire University, go and talk to some people there, and the colleges in Watford, as you come out of Watford towards Rickmansworth and that, there's the college there. Go and find some people in those environments, and do they have a need for this? And if so, how do you position yourself to get involved?
Okay.
And go and offer to do free talks. That's what I do.
Okay.
So, but there again, perhaps if you want to have a further conversation, you've got to try and narrow down what is where you're going to put your focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
Right. Okay. Justin, did you have any questions?
No, I'm good. I've been taking lots of notes. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. If you do want half an hour next week, just on an individual basis, drop me an email. If you want what might help a couple of you with the coaching document, if you want me to email that to you, just drop me an email, and keep in contact. Let me know how you get on. And yeah, if you do want to have a chat anytime, please do. It is hard work, But as I said earlier, as long as I've got a plan, as long as I'm organised, self-motivated, I can think differently, I'm working blooming hard. I was going to say another word then, blooming hard to make it happen. You know, and I'm only ever going to focus on what I can control. You're not going to go far wrong. And it's elbows out, be assertive. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, David.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look
Okay.
after yourselves.